This morning, Howard Binge and myself went to Washington City. We took the cars at Fredericksburg to Acquia Branch, and then on from there to the city. The trip was a pleasurable one, and the weather even finer. We arrived there in Washington around 8 p.m. and delivered our passes to the Provost Marshal's office on the corner of I Street and 9th Street. We stayed the night at the Delavan House on Pennsylvania Avenue, and when we arose, we loafed around town and made several purchases for the company. In the forenoon, we visited the Smithsonian Institute, where they were engaged in making a disinfectant of some sort. We returned from Washington and arrived at Falmouth at about 3 p.m. In the evening, we received orders to rejoin our regiment, which was in camp about 2 miles from Falmouth. When we arrived, the regiment was drawn up in line, and immediately afterwards, we took up a line of march for the steamboat landing about 6 miles below the ford on the Rappahannock River. In the morning, after a few hours' rest, we made preparations to embark aboard the transports, and at 10 a.m., we found ourselves comfortably quartered on board the gunboat Mount Washington. After several delays, we started down the river bound for Richmond, and anchored for the night at around 8 p.m. About daylight, we weighed anchor, and after a time of about 2 hours, we stopped for wood. Several men went ashore to cook breakfast amid a heavy rain, and in the afternoon, the wind being too strong to proceed farther downstream, we anchored until the weather moderated around 4 p.m. Leaving from that location, we entered the Chesapeake Bay, and nearly all of us experienced symptoms of seasickness until we anchored at the mouth of the York River. Pulling up stakes after a short delay, we started out for White House Landing. Our trip up the York River and Pamunkey River were exceedingly pleasant and interesting. Large amounts of government shipping, gunboats and the like passed by as we made our way to the landing. Upon reaching that place, we encamped for the night, a mile distant from the river. In the morning, we took up our line of march at about 8 a.m. The day was hot and sultry, and we marched along the York River and Richmond Railway, encamping 13 miles from Richmond. Today, nothing of importance has occurred. The regiment is in camp at the same place. In the evening, we were called out in line and laid on our arms in case we should be wanted. Guerrilla parties pervert the neighborhood and have committed some depredations. We heard cannonading in the distance, but nothing else. Under marching orders, but no signs of leaving. During the afternoon, the brigade was drawn up for review by General McClellan, but old George didn't come. Later in the evening, the same drill was repeated, with the same result. More important business, no doubt, prevented him from making an appearance. We received orders to march out at daylight the next day. This morning, we were awakened at 2 o'clock a.m. and marched out for picket duty about 3 miles from camp, arriving right at daylight. About the time we settled in, a deserter came over from the rebel lines, and their pickets could be seen assembling in the distance. Upon returning to our camp from picket duty, we watched the observation balloon as it went up to investigate the rebel lines, but its flight was of a short duration. The rebels began firing at it, which made him come down in a hurry. Today, the Bloody Fifth was called to stack their arms and to be ready, with 3 days' rations cooked and in our haversacks. We were then called to go on picket duty at 4 o'clock, and arriving at the picket line about 2, we were called to a bloody fight that came lurking in the darkness. After the fight, it was a sleepless night, it being very hot and sultry. But the fight was resumed again at daylight, with renewed energy on both sides. The rebels, however, gained some ground in this fight when our forces fell back to a stable position, where they are now held in check by the reserve. Today, we are camped about 2 miles from our former camps. All is quiet and pleasant except that heavy firing is being heard in the direction of Richmond, and now we have orders to be ready to fall in at a moment's warning. At 10 o'clock, we started on our march. After marching all night, we found ourselves at Fair Oaks Station. From there, we marched on until about 12 o'clock, when we camped until about 4, and then started again. After marching another 3 miles, we stopped and camped for the night, with the sky clear and the air hot and sultry.
This diary changed hands today, from Yanks to the secessionists. We engaged the Yanks around 3 o'clock, and after serious fighting whipped them, taking about 15 to 20 guns, their baggage, and camp equipment. We also captured a good number of prisoners. Our loss is quite severe, but the Yanks are reported to be much demoralized. The battlefield was a woeful sight to behold. For acres and acres untold, the enemy were lying in heaps. We passed by a nice-looking country house, and before it was a stile or uplifting block, and on it sat a Union soldier with his feet crossed and his gun between his legs. But he was dead and as stiff as the stone upon which he was sitting.
If you enjoyed today's video and would like to see more content like this, be sure to take a shot at the like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest BirdDogg content. And if you'd like to support the channel, for a limited time there's exclusive Civil War Diaries merchandise available in the video link below.